My name is Darrell Steinberg. I'm President Pro Tem of the California State Senate, and I'm also the author of the 2007 landmark law, which I didn't do alone, by the way, SB 375, which says that California must grow, but it will grow in a sustainable way and grow with a real connection between climate change, land use planning, and transportation planning. And it's already beginning to transform the planning landscape in California. That history is important because it's part of what brings us here today. And I look forward to introducing Mayor Quan and all of the other guests behind me, some of who you are going to hear from in a few minutes. But look, the news keeps getting worse when it comes to our climate. A White House report new this week delivered two blunt messages. Climate change is already here, and action is needed now, even more action than the monumental steps that California has already begun to take. We're an international leader in climate policy. And this initiative, which we will describe to you today, will safeguard California's continued leadership for generations to come. As you all know, California created the nation's benchmark for greenhouse gas emissions reductions, AB 32, and from it the cap and trade program that allows companies to sell unused emissions to the biggest polluters. Cap and trade has been a success as it's applied to what are known as stationary sources businesses. But beginning in 2015, fuels, gasoline, diesel fuel, other fuels are going to come under the cap. And that means that the cap and trade revenues are going to grow from now, what is now about $1 billion a year, to between $3 and $5 billion a year as early as 2020. And so today, leaders in the Bay Area, statewide leaders, are calling for a long-term strategy to reinvest these revenues, which again could be as high as $5 billion a year. Without a long-term strategy, a couple things will happen. Every year in Sacramento, there will be, an unorganized race to see who can get most of the money in a given year. See it all the time. It won't be necessarily coherent and it won't necessarily be effective. But more than that, if we don't invest these dollars in the broad way that we suggest here today, the Californians who suffer disproportionately from pollution, our low-income communities, will continue to be forgotten. These issues are clearly visible and painfully felt here in the Bay Area. Whether you're gridlocked on the Bay Bridge at rush hour, or priced out of living near your place of work and negotiating miles of stagnant traffic along I-80 or 880, you are a first-hand witness of a catastrophic funding crisis here in California, because there is no permanent source of funding for affordable housing in California. And there is no permanent source of state funding for mass transit in California. And what does that shortfall mean? The unmet need for affordable housing in the Bay Area exceeds 80,000 units. The poster board breaks those numbers down for both San Francisco and Alameda County, right up there. And look at the people. We're not just talking about the homeless, the most visible manifestation of unnecessary suffering. We're talking about people who you never expect to be in this kind of dilemma. Kindergarten teachers, nurses, ambulance dispatchers, and as a proud lawyer, even law clerks. The funding shortfall for mass transit this decade is $64 billion in operating and capital funds. These two issues combined mean that Californians are now logging more vehicle miles annually than ever before, and we're projected to break the 400 billion miles barrier by 2020. The single largest contributor of greenhouse gas emissions in California is the transportation sector. And so what do we propose? We propose that the state, in this year's budget, meaning the next several weeks, that we pass a long-term investment strategy for how to spend these cap-and-trade funds with permanent sources of funding for public transportation, for public transit, for affordable housing, and for sustainable communities, in addition to a number of other categories, alternative fuel vehicles, and incentivizing new green businesses. What does it mean in the Bay Area? BART's MacArthur Plaza will have the resources it needs. What does it all mean in real terms? We have my friends here from the operating engineers, Local 3. Behind me is a heavy-duty machine holding up nearly 1,000 pounds. Let's lift. Here we go. Those nearly 1,000 pounds, 972 to be exact, represent the volume of harmful emissions, carbon dioxide, removed from the Bay Area each and every day, thanks alone to the 108 affordable housing units being built here at MacArthur Station. Think about what we could do with billions of dollars of funding for transit and affordable housing. Think about how many CO2 emissions we can reduce, and it's not a choice. We have to do it. Building homes near viable mass transit and commerce, smart, sustainable growth dramatically reduces emissions. Our strategy will build communities like this across the Bay Area and throughout the entire state. As the legislature in Sacramento builds on its most ambitious and productive 2 years in recent history, and I say that with pride and with foundation, implementing this long-term investment strategy of cap-and-trade funds would be a huge victory for the economy, for employment, and for California. Before I turn the podium over to the mayor and to others, I want to acknowledge the people who are standing behind me who have been such a crucial part of this coalition. You know, we just passed the laws, and the laws to me are a piece of paper unless and until they're implemented in a way that brings the law to life. And so I'm thrilled that David Armijo, the general manager of AC Transit, is here. Mark Kyle, my friend from Operating Engineers Local 3, and his colleagues who build the infrastructure. Matt Vanderslees from Greenbelt Alliance, Robert Stevenson, the senior project manager at Bridge, the developers responsible for the project. And finally, and maybe most important, the people who don't always get the recognition, the affordable housing residents from Oakland. Mamie Lincoln, William Jackson, who I had the chance to meet earlier, Francine Williams, who are willing to share their stories with you afterwards about what affordable housing has done in their lives and in the broader community. Without further ado, let me introduce the great mayor of the city of Oakland who champions this very kind of approach, Oakland Mayor Jean Quan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Darrell. Thank you, Darrell. Let's give Darrell Steinberg a really big applause, particularly people here. We know that he's been one of the strongest voices for affordable housing and for smart or sustainable growth. And I have to say, when I was a rookie mayor, one of my first fights was within the League of Cities to get support for 375 that has gone on to become a national model. And it's basically smart planning. That is, let's put housing where public transportation is. Let's not continue to sprawl out and take over our fields and our open spaces. And more importantly, let's provide public transportation in the big cities where people live. And it's the part of why Oakland is so livable. The fact that we have been keeping up with affordable housing, and the fact that we've been building and we're planning. If you remember my State of the City, I said we're going to build a second 10K, and this time it would be along the transit corridors. This is an important part of it. 600 new homes, of which we're trying to figure out the percentage, about 15 to 20% will be affordable, so that we can grow new housing for young people who are coming over in big numbers from San Francisco, but at the same time make sure that local people have good and decent housing. And that's what's key to this. In my plan, I call for 25% of all the new housing to be affordable. This would be critical for making that happen, because right now there is no funding source for affordable housing from the state that's ongoing and sustainable. And this will change our ability to plan fair and equitable cities for the whole remaining of this century. It is absolutely critical. It's also steady funding so that we can plan our housing in a real way. We in Oakland have decided 25%, and recently ABAG also said that when we get our cap and trade share, that we will put 25% of the cap and trade funds for affordable housing. And I know there's a little difference between the governor's and the Senate Pro Tem's numbers, but we want to work as hard as we can to get as many affordable housing units in. It's not just fair to our community, but it's important for the planet. Just the last few days can remind us about global warming. In Oakland, if people took just one less trip a week, we would meet our climate action goals. So by building thousands of new homes along bus arterials like MacArthur and Telegraph and International Boulevard that we're planning right now, or building homes at every BART station, it makes such a huge difference and really helps us save the planet while creating really smart and just cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. We're expecting my colleague, Senator Lonnie Hancock, in just a few minutes. I know she was coming down from Sacramento. I got to talk to the pro tem about why she wasn't, why she couldn't get down here earlier. But let me now introduce BART Board President Joel Keller. Joel, thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Steinberg. Thank you for playing such an active role in this linking of transportation and housing. BART plays a major role in smart growth decisions by providing access to safe transit and development, which encourages a transit-first, affordable alternative for all residents. After years of transit funding cuts from the state, a dedicated source of ongoing funds would be a game changer in helping make our roads less congested, the air cleaner, and access to transit easier. A perfect example of transit and affordable housing coming together to improve the quality of life for our community is right here in this place, the BART station here at MacArthur in Oakland. The affordable housing element that will accelerate the rise of an emerging Oakland neighborhood, which was specifically targeted for green development because it's adjacent to one of BART's busiest stations. The area surrounding the station will transform from an area of concrete and freeway to a beautiful space which serves a community of families from all walks of life. This type of revitalization gets to the heart and purpose of Senator Steinberg's landmark legislation, Senate Bill 375, and now there's a plan to provide resources for those like BART who can deliver on the promise. The Bay Area needs affordable housing close to transit throughout the entire BART system, and this cap and trade funding program could make that become a reality. I want to thank Senator Steinberg again for his creativity and courage. His cap and trade proposal supports public transportation as a major component of reducing the number of cars on the freeway, reaching our state's innovative environmental goals that will make life better for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joel. Thank you, Joel. Next, let me introduce Alameda County Supervisor and MTC Commissioner Scott Haggerty. Supervisor, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you, Senator. First of all, before I get started, I really want to thank you for your leadership in making a more sustainable California. And your leadership is evident and continues. First thing that Joel Keller and I noticed when you showed up was the fact you didn't have a jacket on, so we immediately took ours off. So your leadership is well known. I'm also joined by the chairwoman of MTC, Chairperson Amy Worth, who's here with us today. The cap-and-trade investment strategy outlined by Senator Steinberg provides an outstanding foundation and a strong framework for follow-up legislation that will help restore our public transit infrastructure and reinforce California's position as a global leader in clean energy and clean air. Senator Steinberg's strategy for cap-and-trade funds is also consistent with MTC's policy. Last year, our commission wrapped up a 2-year process and adopted a long-term transportation and land use plan known as Plan Bay Area, and then developed our own framework for cap-and-trade investment here in the Bay Area to support that plan. 40% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions come from cars and light trucks, so it makes absolutely sense that a similar share of cap-and-trade revenues go to projects that reduce emissions from transportation. Senator Steinberg's proposal does precisely this, and it goes further, dedicating 30% of the cap-and-trade fund dollars as permanent source of public transit, construction, and operating funds. 10% of the permanent source of funding for the traffic management, street, highway repairs, deferred maintenance, bikeways, and roadway retrofits, plus an additional 20% as a permanent source of funding for the California high-speed rail network. Senator Steinberg recommends that the transportation and land use that a commuter driving a hybrid 20 miles each way from Livermore to Fremont emits more greenhouse gases than an SUV driven 5 miles from the Laurel District to downtown Oakland. So his proposal recommends that the remaining 40% slice of the cap-and-trade funds be used for investment in affordable housing, mixed-use, transit-oriented development, and land use planning and projects that promote transportation efficiency. This is in line with MTC's own recommendations for cap-and-trade funds. We propose to use about 1/3 of our regional money for a competitive grant program to reward the cities and counties that build more housing. Local governments can use these funds to complete streets, bicycle and pedestrians, and streetscapes improvements projects such as these that have already been completed or in the works over on Telegraph Avenue. Other elements of the Bay Area strategy include a grant program to meet our highest priority transit capital needs, including bus and rail car replacement, system expansion, and facility improvements for BART, AC, and Muni. The program to finance service improvements for all Bay Area transit agencies and upgrade to the region's freight movement systems. We know there's a lot of work to be done, and more than a little politics will be played in the next few weeks to come, including more work in the states and in the Assembly, a little bit of politics, as well as with Governor Brown. But Senator Steinberg has plotted a wise course forward. Let's hope the rest of our state leaders have the good sense to follow him.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you. That was thank you for those very kind and supportive comments here. I know it's hot out here, so I want to bring up now together Stuart Cohn from the environmental advocacy group Transform, Amy Fishman from the East Bay Housing Organization, and Peter Cohen from the Council of Community Housing Organizations in San Francisco to make some brief comments, please. Very good. It's all yours.
All right. Thank you. Stuart Cohen from Transform. We're state's largest organization working for walkable communities with excellent transportation choices. And we are here with our partners at the California Housing Partnership to release a new report because 2 years ago, when we started talking about affordable homes near transit as a climate protection strategy, people were scratching their head. How do you know it really gets cars off the road? How can you quantify that? We need to know how many greenhouse gases we're going to save, or we cannot fund it. So with funding from the Ford Foundation and a nationally recognized research group, today we are releasing a report that finally does that. It shows that if the funding that Senator Steinberg is proposing can go to affordable homes near transit over the next 3 years, we will see dramatic greenhouse gas benefits. And in particular, if we could build just 15,000 new affordable homes near good public transit, our analysis shows that we will have 105 million miles per year less on our roads. And that is because low-income folks that move or that are living in areas far from transit drive about twice as much as those living within a quarter mile. Even more, people living within a quarter mile are able to give up half of their vehicles. They own less than one vehicle per person, meaning they can save money not just on an affordable home, but on affordable transportation. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions, that translates for the life of those 3 years of funding into 1.58 million metric tons of carbon reduction. These are serious numbers that we can get from affordable homes near transit. And at the same time, these are the same people that will ride transit even more. Our research shows that extremely low-income folks living in these areas ride transit 4 times more than higher income people living in the exact same location. So we need to put these kind of homes where people that will use transit most live. We just want to thank Senator Steinberg and all of the legislative leaders and others that have understood this connection for a long time. And we're just really happy that we're now able to create a methodology to count those greenhouse gas benefits. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. My name's Amy Fishman with East Bay Housing Organizations, and thank you, Senator Leader Darrell Steinberg, for holding this event during Affordable Housing Week. There are events taking place all throughout Alameda County and Contra Costa County celebrating affordable housing and showing what's possible with great investment. So what does reducing greenhouse gases look like for Oakland, for the East Bay, and for our communities all over California? It means families supporting jobs, lots of green and open spaces, great transit, and quality homes that people can afford. These form the backbone of complete sustainable communities. When we don't include quality affordable housing near jobs and transit, what do we get? We get exclusive urban centers for the wealthy and shanty towns for everyone else. This is bad for our environment and bad for sustainability, and it means traffic everywhere. Building homes that people can afford near jobs and transit is good for our homes, our economies, our children, our communities, and it's good for the environment. From where we are here today, you can see this model. Thank you so much, Bridge. Thank you so much, the investment that made this happen, which was redevelopment dollars, which are no more. This model works, and it's possible. We need to recreate those funds, build those layers of funding to make it possible. The voter-approved bonds for affordable housing are now depleted. So this is a step in the right direction. This is major progress forward towards what it is that we want. And I just want to take a moment to say a couple of examples around the East Bay. If you want to hear some more examples in addition to this, please talk to me. Thank you so much, Senator.
I just see the people getting hot, you know. It's all right. You did a great job, and please make sure we get these examples. Go ahead.
I will just select a couple of short things. Peter Cohen from the Council of Community Housing Organization in San Francisco. On top of what Amy said, one of the consequences that we have seen most acutely in San Francisco, but it's really not exclusive to San Francisco, is this displacement of families when we're not keeping up with our affordable housing needs and we're not stabilizing our communities as they're experiencing the pressures of smart growth. You see the numbers here on this board. Some more numbers for you. Over the last 6 years, we have built maybe 50% of the affordable housing needed by our own housing element, while we've built 212% of our market rate needs. That just stresses and exacerbates that affordable housing crisis. Rents are now over $3,000 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment on the open market, and we've had more than a doubling of the number of evictions over the last year because of these kinds of stresses. This means families are displaced from their communities, from basically smart growth to, as Amy said, outer suburban communities, what folks are calling suburbanization of poverty. Investing money in affordable housing is smart growth. It is the environmental answer. Thank you, Senator Steinberg, for pushing this forward.
I thank all of you, and especially Amy, for all the work that you do in the trenches. I mean, day to day. Like I said earlier, we make the policy, and it's very, very important, but it's how it's carried out. And if we didn't have models like the kind you have described and will describe, then we wouldn't have anything to build off of. So thank you. We'd be happy to answer a few questions, and then we can all run to the shade. Any questions from anyone? Well, the question was, what is the strategy to keep the cap and trade from becoming a feeding frenzy? And the answer is, this is the strategy to prevent the cap and trade dollars from becoming a feeding frenzy. Because if we don't categorize and put percentages to funding over a long period of time, two things will happen. Those who build housing and transit will not have the certainty that the money appropriated in 1 year will continue, so that these projects, which are long-term projects, can actually be built. Secondly, if we don't specify percentages, then exactly what you asked will occur. Every year, the next great technology or the next, what's hot at the moment idea will sort of come to the forefront, and it'll be a feeding frenzy. I have a bias, and I admit it. I have a bias towards clean public infrastructure. Clean public infrastructure for three reasons. Number one, it's essential if we're going to achieve our climate change goals. Number two, it's the best high-wage job creator that I know. And number three, it deals with social equity and the fact that people and communities without public transit, without affordable housing, are left without any real opportunity to participate and to have better lives. So this is the antidote to the feeding frenzy, in my opinion. Sir? What's the strategy for getting the governor to buy in? Well, let me go back to Civics 1A. We have this thing in California and in this country called the separation of powers. The governor puts forward his vision for a budget, but it's actually the legislature who adopts a budget. And he has a blue pencil. But look, there's give and take. And we believe this is important, and I actually think the governor believes this is important too, even though it isn't in his specific plan. For the reasons I just stated a moment ago: high-wage job creation, aggressive climate change policy, and social equity. And by the way, you don't have to spend $1 from the state general fund in order to achieve this vision. I think we'll do fine with the governor. Anything else? Thank you all very much for coming. Really appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Thank you.